Please welcome Peter Yang, Andrew Grimm, Ryan Barbaccia from Brookhaven, Brad Bauer from Adopt Me, and Tyler Gnass from Paradoxum Games.
All right, hey everyone, my name is Peter. I'm really excited to talk to you today about how our top studios use analytics and experimentation to grow their games. I'm really lucky here to be joined by my colleague Andrew, Ryan from Brookhaven, Brad from Adopt Me, and of course Tyler from Tower Defense Simulator. Let me advance the slides. Okay, so here's our agenda today. So first, Andrew and I are going to walk through our new config and experimentation products. And then we're going to spend most of our time with our top creators sharing real examples and tactics of experiments that they ran to grow engagement, monetization, and acquisition for their games. So our vision for analytics is to hopefully guide all of you to take the most important actions to grow your games faster. And we'll be shipping a lot this year, including these new insight reports that try to summarize and aggregate all the metrics and player feedback that you have. But today we really want to focus on configs and experimentation. And I want to invite my colleague Andrew here to talk about why we think these products are a game changer for all of you.
All right, thanks, Peter. So I'm Andrew Grimm, an engineer here at Roblox, and I think every single one of us in this room is obsessed with the same question. How do I make my experience better for players? So last year at RDC, we launched funnel analysis. It was all about understanding where in our games players dropped off. But today I want to talk about the next step. What can we do about that? So let's say we want to build a better Fatui. We see people dropping off, and we get it ready. We're ready to ship. We're going to hit publish, brace for impact. What can go wrong? Well, let's check our error stats. Oh my God, there's so many errors. Okay, what do? We jump into Studio. I can try to yank out the whole feature. I can try to find the bug and fix it. Maybe I shut the whole game down if it's bad enough. So was there a better way that we could have done this and prevented the panic? Instead of a painful hotfix, we could have used a runtime config, and specifically a feature flag. Think of it as a remote-controlled if statement around our new tutorial. It gives us an on-off switch. When those errors appeared, we could have flipped that switch and instantly disabled the feature for everyone. No editing in Studio, no server restarts. The problem would have been solved in seconds. Roblox internally uses remote configs extensively. We make hundreds of changes every day across all our surfaces. So now that we've got a safer way to release our feature, how will we know if it actually improves our metrics? We could wait a week and look at before and after comparisons of our analytics to see how it affected things. But what about all the external factors that also affect our games? There's weekends, holidays. What if a popular streamer played our game? These are all called confounding factors and can easily mislead you if you're just comparing time periods. What we could use here is experimentation and specifically A/B testing. Can I get a show of hands for who's familiar with A/B tests in general? Okay, cool, like 2/3, that's awesome. And how many people have actually ran an A/B test inside a Roblox game? Okay, also a good amount, that's great. So a true experiment neutralizes confounding factors by showing more than one version of something to random players at the same time. You can isolate the impact of your change from all the outside noise. So the goal of an experiment is to be confident that if we ran it again, we'd get the same results. So I'm going to go over the basics of an A/B test. We've got something we want to test. In this case, this button that says click me, and we're not getting enough clicks on it. We want to find a better version. So we're going to come up with a hypothesis. We want to increase the urgency, and in this simple example, we're just going to change the button to red because we think that'll drive some urgency. So we've got our new version. We're going to call these the control and the variant. Now, once we run the test, we're going to get some results. In this example, we're going to say we had 1,000 users in each group. The first one had 30 clicks, and the second group had 35. So while we did see an improvement, it's pretty small, especially for a relatively small sample size. So the question is, if we ran this test again, do we think we'd see the same results, or would they flip-flop? We don't really know, right? So I'm going to go through a couple more examples. Let's say I've got two just basic coins, and I want to flip them and see how many times they each come up heads. So in the first example, I'm going to do that test. First one comes up 5, second one comes up heads 7 times. If I ran that test again, those results are just totally random, right? Like everybody knows that a regular coin is going to come up heads about half the time. So another experiment. my friend Peter here has a coin that I'm going to say he got through dubious origins. I think it's weighted. He says it's just lucky. So let's run the test and see how it goes. We got the exact same results. And we know from the first test that this is pretty much just random with a small sample size. So what can we do about that? Let's flip them 1,000 times each. OK, we're getting somewhere. We still got pretty much the same results as far as percentages. But experiment 3 is obviously much more convincing. Intuitively, we can see that when you run it this many more times, it starts to move from lucky streaks into measurable patterns. But we're still just using intuition. Can we go a step further? We can, and the solution here is math. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to show any formulas. We're going to try to do all the math for you. But there's the idea of statistical significance, and I'm going to say stat-sig for short because it's a mouthful. Using outcomes to measure if the results were random chance or not. You can pick a confidence level and then calculate a confidence interval. This is the range where we think the true value of that test would fall. As you increase sample size, you decrease and shrink the confidence intervals. So in our example here, if the range spans the 0%, it's not stat-sig. If it's fully above, like the platinum bundle, it's about 4% better than our control. It's stat-sig. And if it's fully below, the gold bundle in this example is about 2% worse. So let's go back to the earlier tests. And remember, with only 10 flips, we've got this huge confidence interval, which is pretty much what we'd expect. But with 1,000 flips, it shrinks, becomes precise, and we can show that it's about 40% better than a regular coin. So I can finally prove that Peter's lucky coin was, in fact, loaded. I knew it. OK, so I've shown you why we need a way to safely deploy code, and more importantly, a scientifically valid way to measure our impact and learn what actually works. To make confident decisions, we need to run experiments. And to show you some tools that can make all of this possible, I'm going to hand it back to Peter.
All right, thanks, Andrew. OK, so first we're working on configs to let you roll out features and update in-game values in real time without restarting your servers, kicking out any players. And you'll be able to create and edit configs in both Studio and Creator Hub, right? And then we're busy working on experimentation to let you measure causal impact from both your in-game changes and also your matchmaking configuration changes. And so let me give you guys a quick tour of the product, right? So suppose we're working on a dungeon RPG and our D1 retention is below benchmark. And upon closer examination, we look at the funnel and we see that 33% of players are even make it into our first dungeon, right? So our experiment hypothesis is that we can grow D1 retention by by testing a new onboarding dungeon that's guided and way more fun. So let's create our experiment. So let's create a 50-50 experiment. 50% of users see the new onboarding dungeon and 50% see the current one. And we'll set D1 retention as our goal metric. And we'll run the experiment. We'll set a duration for about 14 days or about 2 weeks. Now, a quick tip here is that a larger rollout and a longer duration will let you detect smaller stat-sig lifts than if you didn't set it properly. So for example, you can detect a 1% lift in D1 retention instead of only a 5% or above lift. So let's run our experiment. And while it's running, you can monitor its progress in the experiment list. And when the planned duration is reached, when the 14 days is reached, we will show a decision needed status on the experiment. And you can click on that to view the results. Now, a very important tip here, and I make this mistake all the time, is the day after you launch your experiment, you're like, let me just look at the results. I won't do anything. I look at the results, and then you look at the results, and it's like, oh crap! It's like 30% lift or 30% dropped in retention, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna ramp this now, and try to avoid doing that, right? Because that's usually novelty effect or something else is going on. You definitely want to wait until your numbers are stat-sig, or ideally at least wait 2 weeks before you start making choices about what you want to do. So here are the results for this example experiment. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see all the metrics here. And you see here that D1 retention is up 37%, and session time is down 2%, and both are stat-sig. If there's shading in the background, that means it's stat-sig. And often you have to kind of make trade-offs here, right? Where one thing is up stat-sig and another thing is down stat-sig. And in this case, it's pretty obvious because retention is up so much that it's pretty obvious that we just ramp the experiment to all our users so that they can all see the new onboarding flow and we can realize our lift. So that's just a quick example. But I want to hand it over to Ryan now to talk about a real example for Brookhaven. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Barbaccia, and I am the product lead on Brookhaven. For those of you who aren't familiar, Brookhaven is a top role-playing experience where users can own houses, drive cars, customize their avatar, role-play any scenario, and be whoever they want to be in the small town of Brookhaven. Today, I'm excited to be sharing some of the experiments we've run, including one of our most important features, the avatar editor. As you might expect, the avatar editor allows players to customize their avatar. Players can equip any item from the UGC marketplace for free within the Brookhaven experience. Character customization is core to any role-playing experience. In fact, it's so important in Brookhaven, it's used by over 70% of our users every day. So what's the problem? Well, the avatar editor was due for some improvements. Players have been asking for new features, such as 3D clothing. We were running on an old backend that needed to be updated, and we wanted to add some UI and UX polish. So we decided to set up an A/B test. The reason we decided on an A/B test for this feature is that we could understand the impact the test would have on our metrics before we rolled it out to all of our users. And as with any experiment, we had a hypothesis. Our hypothesis for this was that by launching this new avatar editor, we'd see a lift in both playtime and early player retention. For the experiment setup, we had two groups. Our control, which would be the avatar editor with no changes made to it, and the new editor, which would have all the features I mentioned before, the 3D clothing, the new backend, and the UI and UX polish. Before I get into the results, there's a couple of pointers I want to share with you all when you start getting started with experimentation in your own games that I think can be really helpful. The first is going to be informing your players. We've learned from our experience that many players on Roblox aren't familiar with experimentation. In fact, many of them find it surprising that themselves or one of their friends is having a different experience from one another. Sending a simple message in your Discord, communities, or in your update log can go a long way in building the transparency and trust that players want, especially as you continue to experiment more in the future. The second point is going to be around playtesting. We all playtest every day. Anytime we package up a build, we're testing it to make sure that it's working bug-free in the way we intend. Sometimes, when features are really important or they're different, we want to make sure we test with our players first. We give them a version of the build, we get feedback from them. That's great. These types of tests are awesome, and they're even more valuable in the context of in the context of experimentation. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say I took the avatar editor and I didn't play test it with my players, and I just rolled it out as an experiment. I took the wise words of Peter, and I didn't look at the results for about a week or so. And finally, I take a peek, and I see that my results are actually negative, and I'm quite surprised by it. And I go and talk to my communities, and they say, well, you know, the new categories you chose for 3D clothing didn't really make a lot of sense. I was actually kind of confused. Well, if I'm hearing in my communities, I'm probably experiencing it with my other players. This is something that could have easily been caught in a playtest. And so I highly recommend trialing this when you get started with experimentation. So now you've informed your players, maybe you've run a playtest with them, and you're getting ready to roll it out. Two more things to consider. The first is going to be your group sizes. There's lots of ways to think about group size, the number of variants you have, and other things and other factors. But one thing on our team we like to think about is risk. Not every feature is made the same. Something like the avatar editor I might consider to be relatively high risk. 70% of our users engage with it every day. It's a feature that players really love. I want to make sure that when I go to roll this out, I can minimize any negatives that might come from it. So starting with a smaller group size might be beneficial because I can always ramp it later once I'm confident with the results. The second point is going to be time. And Peter touched on this, Andrew's touched on this, we're all going to touch on this, but letting your test sit long enough is critical. Getting stat sig is the entire reason why we test. It's literally confidence in the numbers that we have. And to give you an idea of how important it really is, I have an example here from Brookhaven of what it took for us to test and build the avatar editor. So by late April, we kicked off development, and by mid-May, we had our first public playtest, right? The way we did this was that we sent a link to our users with access to a place. They were able to play it with the new editor being the test variant. And so we also launched a Google form that players could provide to us. So we had structured feedback that we could collate and address. We ran a second public playtest to give players additional time to give more feedback and get the fine tuning in. By early June, we were ready to release, and we went live at 10%. So 90% of our users were still in the control group, and 10% had the new editor. About a week later, after looking at some of the numbers, we felt confident and ramped it to 50%. At this point, we're just looking for stat sig. We wanted stat sig in some of our variables like D7 retention, which takes a long time to get. And so we waited 2 more weeks. And by early July, we were ready to launch, and we rolled out 100% to all of our players. In total, this is 28 testing days, including 2 public play tests. It might seem like a long time, but the wait's totally worth it. We saw a 14% increase in new user playtime. We also saw an 8.5% increase across day 0 through day 7 retention. And surprisingly, we also saw a drop in ARPDAU. This is something, as Peter mentioned, you always have to make trade-offs, but given the lifts that we saw here, we were totally okay with it. It was a big win for our team, and our players are really happy with the results as well. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Brad.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. I am Brad Bauer. I am the game director for Adopt Me, which is a pet care and collection game on Roblox for anyone who hasn't had a chance to try it out yet. So, in addition to a lot of the major features that you can put out there, A/B tests are also incredibly useful for those smaller quality of life updates that you'd be looking to do. For today, I wanted to cover one of these that we did in the past year in Adopt Me. And so, to give some context and background in here, Adopt Me was having an issue where bad actors were impersonating other players. They would come in, copy their username of someone, they would get their friend to show up, and then try to trade them, do a trust trade with them to hand over a pet. Therefore, the player will lose their pet to the bad actor. And so for us, we said, we've got to do something about this. We can't keep letting this happen. And so we came up with a number of solutions. And the reason we decided to go with an A/B test on this is that trading in Adopt Me normally directly reflects into engagement for us. When we see engagement, or when we see trading go up, engagement usually follows. And so we wanted to be incredibly careful when we were touching this metric, where we know we're directly going to bring trading down. And so our hypothesis and the solution that we went with was that we wanted to try to introduce a delay when someone was new to the game. You wouldn't be allowed to trade for the first couple of hours. So I'll show what those kind of looked like and what the players were seeing here. So as you can see on the left, our control group everything was normal. You'd be able to jump into the game, trade as usual. But in our test group, the player would instead be presented with a message that said, you can't trade for the next however long was remaining. And so this would directly interfere with anyone trying to pull off this sort of a scam within the community. And now our hope with this is that we would see scam reports going down, and at the same time, we were really hoping that we would at least have minimal negative impacts to the rest of our stats. And so let's, before we get into the actual results of this, I want to take a moment just to look at some of the data that we were getting back and to really encourage everyone to take a moment to dive deep into the data as you get it. So what you can see up here is there's obviously a major difference between 2 of these groups at the very start. And then as it goes on over time, you're starting to see them kind of come back together. What this graph is showing on the bottom, on the x-axis there, is you're seeing the first session length time. And then on the y-axis is the total play time. So what you're seeing with the control group is basically within the first few seconds of the game, players are suddenly, for some reason in the control group, sticking with that at a much higher rate. And then over time, coming back to normal. So something isn't feeling right about that. And we were trying to figure out, what's going on here. And so we dug in deeper to try to see, what's happening. The answer, ultimately, the people that we were targeting were exactly what that group is inside of the control. Those are the bots and the alt accounts. They had a way to be able to see if they were on the correct account or within a test group or not right away. And so we did that. Without that investigation, we probably would have looked at this and said, "Ooh, we're having some really negative impacts." But we were able to figure out, no, there's something more happening here. So as you are looking at your data, consider segmenting it. That could take the form of new players versus veteran players, or maybe looking at your data based on different player types. For Adopt Me, that would take the form of maybe traders or the collectors or builders in the game, and seeing how does the data move based on those different player types. And one other piece is to just always consider, if something doesn't make sense, you do have the option to jump back in and run another A/B test, create another hypothesis. It may make sense in order to use that time to figure out exactly what's happening, and will ultimately provide you with that extra insight regardless that you'll be able to use going forward. So going back to the results that we saw, this was a huge success for us. Scam reports went down across the game by 5.5%. We were just hoping that we weren't going to go negative on our other stats, but we ended up seeing playtime go up 1%, and revenue even went up about 2%. So small A/B tests, even like this one, with just a control and a variant on a small portion of the game, can really have massive impacts for engagement for your audience. And with that, I will pass it over to Tyler.
Thank you. So I'm Tyler, the studio director at Paradoxum Games. We're always optimizing Tower Defense Simulator to keep players engaged. And one area we wanted to focus on was matchmaking. So the problem we had was matchmaking times were taking too long, and that caused some frustrating players and leading to drop-offs. So the tickets had too many parameters and creating some niche cases when players were combined with game mode, difficulty, and party size. So our hypothesis was to reduce these parameters, such as simplifying the difficulty options and shortening pairing times and increasing average play time. To test this, we ran an experiment to compare the standard multi-difficulty setup against a streamlined version. In our experiment setup, we split our users into a 60% control and a 40% variant. In our control, we had players choose the difficulty up front in the matchmaking menu, and that would have tickets covering the game mode, the difficulty, and the party size, and there was no in-game voting. In the variant, we streamlined it by removing the difficulty from the menu, and the tickets only cover the game mode and the party size, which difficulty was later handled through in-game voting. Turning to the results from our variant implementation, before the update, we were averaging about 4,000 matches disconnects per hour out of roughly 34,000 matches played. And right after the update went live, we saw a noticeable spike in disconnects largely tied to migration challenges. But overall, the average disconnect rates increased by 40%, underscoring early friction in the new streamlined matchmaking flow. And looking at this player behavior, the 40% jump in disconnects was a clear red flag. It signaled player frustration. But on the upside, we did see a 14% increase in average playtime and a 4% lift in our day one retention. But a major drawback stood out. Players often quit immediately if the voted difficulty didn't match their preference, which led to creating a poor experience. Because of that, we chose to stick with the control version, prioritizing fewer disconnects and stronger community vibes over modest metric gains. And I'll be handing it over to Ryan.
Thank you. Okay, I'm back. We are going to switch gears a little bit and talk about monetization. Some context here. So historically in Brookhaven, when a user would click on something that was a pay-gated piece of content, something behind a Game Pass, nothing would happen. There was no feedback. Let me give you an example. Player clicks on the hoverboard, which is behind the premium Game Pass. There was nothing. No pop-up, no message saying you can't equip this, nothing directing them to the store. I think we can all see the problem very quickly here, right? This is something you would expect. You'd expect to see some sort of an upsell. And so we saw this as a big opportunity, right? We called it contextual upsells. When a user is trying to use something in a particular context, we upsell them with the opportunity to buy the product. A lot of you probably already do this in your games today. We didn't have it. Great. So we have a very simple hypothesis, right? By adding this in, we should see a lift in both ARPDAU and conversion. So I think it really almost begs the question, This is blatantly obvious. It seems like a really easy win. We should definitely roll it out, but like maybe for every day we don't have this, we might be losing money. Why are we even bother testing this? It should just be out in the wild. We know it's going to work. There's two problems with that. The first is going to be magnitude. I couldn't tell you how much this is going to lift by. It could be 5%, it could be 50%, but you really don't know. And so it's important to test against a control so you can make sure that there isn't some sort of external force that's driving up the revenue or whatever the metric is that you might be looking at. And the second point, which is arguably the most important, is I could say with pretty high confidence that this is probably going to move ARPDAU and conversion. I couldn't tell you, though, that it wasn't going to move a different player metric. Let me paint you a quick picture. Take a user that's brand new to Brookhaven. They've never played before. They have no context about it. They go in and they click the hoverboard, and this pop-up comes up. And they say, I don't have Robux in my account, cancel. They click on something else, and another pop-up, and they cancel. And by the second one, they go, you know what, I'm done with this game, I'm out. It's not hard to believe that there could be a world that players would be negatively impacted by showing them pop-ups, even when it's something that's pay-gated. And so it's important to remember to test even when things seem really obvious. In this example, fortunately, looking at the results real quick, it was a great win. We saw a 10% lift in ARPDAU. We saw an 18% lift in payer conversion rate. And very fortunately, we also saw no change in playtime and retention. And that was the most important thing for our team, was that we could introduce this without having to make a large trade-off. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Brad.
All right, so on the monetization side, I really wanted to spend some time to just talk about running A/B tests with starter packs. I think starter packs are something that many of us use inside of our own experiences, and wanted to talk about a few of the things that we've done inside of here. So before I get into the example, I really wanted to start by talking about some of the variables that we like to test. So one of the things would be product types. Inside of Adopt Me, that would be the form of pets versus maybe a house, or offering bucks as currency to players. We like to also look at things like cost. Do you start with a really low cost? Maybe you go higher? Where's the right spot from a spend standpoint? Presentation is another huge one. What is the player going to see? What's the art that pops up on them that they're going to be looking at to make their decision of if they want to purchase or not? When do you prompt them? Are you going to throw at them the moment that they join into the game? Maybe it's right after they finish the tutorial, or maybe it's after a really positive experience in the game that you say, now is the right time to prompt them with this. And then finally, we also like to look at offer duration. Is this something that you're going to say, hey, let's go with the FOMO route? You've got about 10 minutes to decide if you're going to make this purchase, or is it something that maybe you give them a week to decide so that they get a chance to become familiar with your game and to really understand why this is such a great offer to them? So let's go ahead and look at one of the examples we did. I think Peter might have spoiled a little bit of this one yesterday for us. But so Adopt Me, very recently this year, we had updated the presentation portion of our starter packs. And with that update, it became very obvious that maybe one of our products in here wasn't as cracked up as it should be. As Peter said yesterday, I really liked your joke. I thought that worked well. So thought I'd steal that. So yeah, we had the cracked egg, as you can see up here, and it really just, I don't know anyone that would look at that and be like, I really want to buy a cracked egg. That's the thing that I need in my inventory. So we said, let's go ahead and try out something new. So we brought in instead what is our royal egg in the game. It has a nice crown on it, and it also comes with another advantage, which is that we were able to tell people that it was guaranteed uncommon or better, which is important when we're talking new users who, again, are not exactly familiar with the game. Seeing something like uncommon or better pet is terminology that at least is more known, and it kind of gives everyone a starting point when they're trying to judge the value on it. So let's go ahead and take the results and take a look at the results on this. So our new user ARPU jumped up 6% from this change. Our new user conversion went up 6% as well. And we had a nice surprise D7 retention jumping up 2% on top of all of that. So overall, big success for us. We were very happy with where this ended up. One tip that I do want to give here, as we were all talking about stat sig, is how important that is with this sort of a test. So, the number of spenders in your game is already a very small number of your player base. New users is a small portion of your player base as well. Put those together, the new user spender is a very, very small segment of your users. So you have to give this time to bake when you do this. For example, this example for us for Adopt Me took us just over a month to get to statistical significance. So you need to give it that time. Don't knee-jerk react. You will see, particularly the first day, the second day, it may jump up 40%, might drop 60% the next day. It takes time for that to level out. Give it that time before you make your decision on that. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Tyler to jump us into the next section.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about experiments to improve new user acquisition. So thumbnails are the front door to your game. So let me walk you through an experiment that we ran with our PvP update back in July. So the problem we wanted to set out to solve was maximizing our QPTR to help drive user acquisition. So our hypothesis was simple. If we follow recent trends, like hand-drawn styles, we'll see a lift in QPTR and new users. To test this, we ran an experiment. So our control, we had a 3D render of the new game mode packed with action and competitiveness. And our variant had a hand-drawn style focusing on fewer characters and a cleaner style. So the results were clear. Our variant delivered a 2 times higher QPTR than our control. And as we continue to refine our thumbnail strategies through iterative testing, which by experimenting with art styles, elements like vibrant scenes, character focus, and thematic updates, we have consistently lifted QPTR. For example, one of our variants had a 1.2x increase, another was a 1.5, and our top performer delivered a 2 times boost over our baselines. So the key takeaway here is iterative thumbnail testing works. It strengthens homepage recommendations and drives traffic to your game. And now I'll hand it off to Brad.
Thanks, Tyler. So I think I'm going to really just reiterate a lot of what Tyler just nailed on this is with the example that we recently used, this was back in the spring. We were running one of our big spring festivals. It was a cherry blossom festival that we put in. And this is a perfect chance for us to do some thumbnail testing as well. For some context, I think Adopt Me, we always have somewhere between 3 to 5 thumbnails running at any given time, just really trying to gather as much data and information as we can. Roblox's entire thumbnail testing system works so seamlessly that it really is just a great way to be gathering information. So in the spring, we ran this. You can see we said, we're going to really show off our new mini game, our new pet. And so you can see that in the variant on the right. We were going for a real action shot and thought that's exciting and it's going to pull players in. So we used our Kai Jr. over there, knocking over the blocks, which was part of the mini game. And we put that up against one of our historically high performers, which is the dog walking, which really fits well with Adopt Me. I think when you think about a pet care game, taking a dog for a walk is about as quintessential as it gets. But our hope was, this is really going to pull people in and get that attention and deliver on that. So how did we do? We lost on this one. We ended up finding that our control group performed 5% better than the thumbnail. So I think there were a lot of key learnings that came out of this that everyone can take and apply to their own games. So up here you'll see a bunch of different thumbnails that we've tested out. I think you can tell we really like the dog, or I guess the player base really likes the dog because it is all over. So the first thing, and I think this is one of the big lessons that we learned out of this, is that you have to remember your audience. The thumbnail tests are typically being shown on home recommendations. And what types of players is that actually showing up for? It's typically to new players, people who have not come into your game before. So those players, they don't really care about a new mini game or even that we're running a spring festival necessarily. What they are trying to judge at that moment is this a game I want to play in general? The other big thing, make it relevant. I think it's really easy to make a clickbait thumbnail. I think we've all been there where we've been baited into a clickbait thumbnail and find out that the game inside of there is not what the cover was showing off. this is really detrimental to your game. You may get a higher QPTR, but you're probably not going to be able to succeed on all of the other stats that, that the algorithm and that the players ultimately are looking for inside of there. And the last piece is to really stand out. Roblox has so many amazing experiences, and so many thumbnails are trying to grab a player as they are on that homepage. So what are you going to do to be able to stand out and make sure that someone sees yours and wants to click through it? So now you've all had a chance to kind of look at this. I'm sure your question is, which one of these is Adopt Me's highest performer? So we'll go ahead and reveal it. We'll see if your guess was right when you looked at it. So our winner, this is the pet collection thumbnail, is the one that typically performs about 1.7 times better than our average thumbnail. And I think it's clear why when you look at it. It is hitting exactly what the game is about pets, about collecting. It's vibrant and colorful, and really just hits exactly what someone would be looking for inside of the game. So with that, Peter, I hand it back over to you.
All right. All right, thanks everyone. So we just covered some real experiments that our top creators here run to grow engagement, monetization, and acquisition for their games. And experiments help you test changes safely, make data-driven decisions, and ultimately help you grow your game faster, right? Now, experiments are super powerful, right? But remember that your creativity should still be in the driver's seat. Experiments will give you signal, but you should feel empowered to decide what you want to build next for your game, right? There's other signals too, like player feedback, and other signals you should consider as well. So with that, we have a QR code here, and where everyone's hard at work on this feature, and hopefully we'll launch it later this year. And if you want to get early access or help us test the feature, help us test the experiment feature, please take a picture of the QR code and fill out a quick application form, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And Andrew has also printed these stickers, Confidence Boost, that we'll be hanging out in the back there. I don't think they're officially sanctioned by Roblox, but Andrew's very passionate. So come get some stickers after this. Yeah. Thank you.